cruise. A family cruise. If you had asked me a week ago what paradise looked like, I would have pointed to this, a massive ocean liner cutting through the deep blue, the sun painting golden streaks on the water, my wife laughing with a cocktail in hand, my son exploring the ship with his best friend. It was supposed to be perfect. I remember standing on the deck that first evening, inhaling the salty breeze, thinking about how lucky I was. Claire and I had been married for 15 years, and though life had its ups and downs, we had built something strong. We had a home, a life, a son we adored. I had no reason to doubt her. No reason to question anything. Until that night. I was coming back from the ship's bar, just a little buzzed but in a good way, relaxed. The hallway to our cabin was quiet, the soft hum of the ship's engine the only sound. I slid the key card into the lock and stepped inside. That's when my world split apart. My son, Daniel, was tied up on the floor. His mouth was gagged, his eyes wide with terror. And there, on our bed, was Claire. But she wasn't alone. His best friend, Jeremy, the kid I'd practically helped raise, the kid who had spent weekends at our house since they were 10, was on top of my wife. The blood pounded in my ears. Claire turned her head lazily, as if this was all perfectly normal. Then she smiled. Smiled. "We were wondering when you'd show up," she said, her voice light, teasing, as if we were playing some ridiculous game. Jeremy chuckled, a low, self-satisfied sound. "Yeah. We were just talking about you, Mr. Carter." He got up slowly, completely unashamed, adjusting his belt like he had all the time in the world. "You're gonna want to sit down for this next part." I couldn't move. My body was frozen between rage and disbelief, caught in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Jeremy strolled toward me, completely unbothered. "See, we had a little plan. You're gonna take a nap, and when you wake up, well, you'll be enjoying the view, let's just say that." I barely processed his words before Claire, my wife, the mother of my son, nodded in agreement. And then she laughed. It was that laugh that snapped something inside me. They had no idea. No clue what was coming next. I don't remember making the decision. 1 second, Jeremy was smirking, confident. The next, my fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling backward into the nightstand. The lamp crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. His head snapped back, dazed. Claire screamed, but it wasn't a scream of horror. It was frustration, anger, like I had ruined something for her. "You idiot," she spat, scrambling off the bed. I didn't give her a chance to say more. My focus was on Jeremy. He groaned, trying to push himself up, but I didn't let him. I grabbed the little traitor by his collar and dragged him up to his feet. "Untie him," I growled, my voice barely my own. Jeremy groaned. "Man, you should." I slammed him against the wall. "Untie my son." Claire hesitated for a moment, her hands shaking. But I saw something else in her eyes, calculating. She wasn't afraid of me. She was planning her next move. She went to Daniel, working the knots with shaky hands. My son's eyes were filled with tears, but he stayed silent. He had his mother's face, her blonde hair, but right now, there was nothing of her in him. The moment his hands were free, Daniel yanked the gag from his mouth. "Dad." I turned to him. "Get out." "But." "Go." My voice cracked through the room like a whip. Jeremy made a move then, probably thinking I was distracted. Big mistake. I had spent my 20s in construction, and while I wasn't some action hero, I knew how to handle myself. The moment his body shifted, I sent my knee into his stomach. He gasped, doubling over. Another punch, right to the jaw, and he dropped like dead weight. Claire shrieked and lunged at me, her hands clawing at my arm. "You psycho," she screamed. I shoved her off. "Run, Daniel!" I shouted. He hesitated for only a second before bolting out the door. Jeremy groaned on the floor, his lips split, blood dripping onto the carpet. Claire panted, her chest heaving. But she wasn't crying. No, her lips curled into something almost amused. "You really think this ends with you winning?" she breathed. Jeremy let out a hoarse laugh, wiping the blood from his mouth. "Yeah, old man," he wheezed. "We're just getting started." Then he reached into his pocket. I saw the glint of metal. Adrenaline surged through my body. No time to think, just react. Before he could pull the blade completely, my boot connected with his face. His head snapped back, colliding with the edge of the nightstand. Silence. Claire let out a shocked gasp. "Jeremy?" He didn't answer. His body slumped, unmoving. For a second, I thought I had killed him. I didn't have time to find out. The ship's security could be here any second. Claire turned to me, eyes wild. "You moron. Do you know what you've done?" I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "Yeah. I know exactly what I've done." She stumbled back. "You're not getting away with this." I gave her a twisted smile. "Neither are you." Then I grabbed Jeremy by the ankles, dragged his dead weight to the balcony, and with one final heave, I threw him overboard. The splash was lost in the endless hum of the ocean liner cutting through the waves. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of my own breathing. My heart pounded like a war drum in my chest. Claire stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, eyes wide with disbelief. "You," she swallowed hard. "You threw him overboard." I wiped the sweat from my brow, stepping away from the railing. "Yeah. I did." Her face twisted into something between horror and rage. "You're insane." I let out a bitter laugh. "I walked into our cabin and found our son tied up while his best friend was on top of you." "Don't talk to me about insane, Claire." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her hands shaking, not with fear, but with fury. And that's when I realized something. She wasn't afraid of what I'd done. She was angry because I had ruined her plan. I took a slow step toward her, keeping my voice low. "Tell me something, Claire. Whose idea was it?" She didn't answer. I grabbed her wrist, squeezing just enough to make her wince. "Tell me." She yanked herself free, her blue eyes burning with hatred. "You think you're the victim here?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You bore me, Adam. You've always bored me. Year after year, the same routine, the same dull life." I grabbed her by the throat, shoving her against the wall. "That's my son, Claire." She gasped but didn't struggle. Instead, her lips curled into a smile, her voice barely above a whisper. "And he'll grow up knowing exactly what kind of monster his father is." My grip tightened. For a second, just a second, I imagined squeezing harder. Ending this. Ending her. But I didn't. Because I heard footsteps. "Daniel." I let go, stepping back just as the door burst open. "Dad." My son's voice was filled with panic. "Security's coming." I turned to him, his face pale, his eyes darting between me and his mother. "We have to go," he whispered. Claire touched her neck, coughing slightly before straightening. She looked at me with an almost smug expression, like she had already won. And I knew right then, she wasn't going to scream. She wasn't going to call for help. She wanted security to find me. I grabbed Daniel's wrist. "Run." And we ran. We bolted down the corridor, my pulse hammering in my ears. The ship's interior stretched ahead in an endless maze of identical doors and hallways. Footsteps pounded from somewhere behind us, security was coming. Daniel ran beside me, his breathing ragged. "Dad, where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," I said, though I had no idea where that was. I could still see Claire's face in my mind, calm, almost victorious. She wasn't going to run. She wanted me caught. She wanted to play the victim. I had to disappear before that happened. We turned a corner and nearly slammed into a crew member. A young man in a white uniform. His eyes flickered from my face to Daniel's, taking in our panic. "Sir." "Bathroom," I gasped. "Kid sick." It was weak, but I didn't have time for anything better. I pushed past him before he could question it, pulling Daniel into the nearest door. We found ourselves in a storage room, metal shelves stacked with towels, cleaning supplies, and extra linens. It was cramped, but it would do. I pressed my ear against the door. Voices in the hallway. Getting closer. Daniel's hands were shaking. "Dad, what's happening?" I crouched down to his level, gripping his shoulders. "Listen to me. I need you to stay quiet, okay?" His breath hitched, but he nodded. I exhaled slowly. "Good. Now tell me, what happened before I walked in?" Daniel hesitated, eyes darting to the door. "Daniel." I squeezed his shoulders. "I need to know." He swallowed hard. "Jeremy, he told me we were going to play a prank on you." My stomach turned. "What kind of prank?" He looked away. "He said he wanted to surprise you when you walked in. That's why he tied me up." His voice cracked. "I thought it was a joke, Dad. I thought." I clenched my fists. Claire had let it happen. No, worse, she had been part of it. "Did Mom say anything?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. Daniel hesitated again. She told me not to struggle." My jaw tightened. That confirmed it. Claire hadn't just let it happen, she had wanted it to happen. The footsteps outside grew louder. Then, something worse. A voice. Claire's voice. "Yes, that's him," she said, loud enough for security to hear. I don't know what happened. He just snapped. He attacked Jeremy and then." A gasp. A perfect little whimper of fear. "He threw him overboard." My hands curled into fists. She was framing me. She was really doing it. Daniel looked up at me, his small face pale with confusion. "Dad, why is Mom lying?" I had no answer for him. The door handle rattled. Security had found us. The handle twisted violently. "Sir, open the door." A deep voice boomed from the other side. Daniel flinched. My mind raced. I couldn't fight them, not here, not now. I needed a way out. I scanned the storage room. Metal shelves, mops, towels, nothing useful. Then my eyes landed on a small vent near the ceiling. It was risky. Maybe too small. But I had no choice. I turned to Daniel, gripping his face gently. "Listen to me. I need you to climb up there." His eyes widened. "What?" "But." "No time," I said firmly. "Go. Now." Bang. The door shuddered as someone threw their weight against it. Daniel hesitated for only a second before scrambling onto the shelves. I boosted him up, pushing him toward the vent. The screws were loose, thank God. He pried the grate off and squeezed inside. I don't know where to go." His voice was shaking. "Just crawl," I said. "I'll find you." He nodded, then disappeared into the darkness. Bang! The door burst open. 2 security officers stormed in, one tall and broad, the other shorter but stocky. The taller one grabbed me by the arm, yanking me forward. "Where's the boy?" I jerked my arm free. "What boy?" The shorter one grabbed me this time, twisting my arm behind my back. Pain flared through my shoulder. "Don't play games," he growled. "We know you're traveling with a kid. Where is he?" I clenched my jaw. He ran. It was a gamble. If they believed me, they'd waste time searching the halls instead of tearing this room apart. The tall one muttered something into his radio. Claire's voice crackled through the speaker. "Is he restrained?" "Yeah, we got him," the guard responded. A pause. Then, "Bring him to me." The guards exchanged glances. "Ma'am," one of them said hesitantly, "we should probably take him to." I said, "Bring him to me." I could practically hear the smirk in her voice. My stomach twisted. Claire wasn't handing me over to the captain. She wanted to deal with me herself. And that meant Daniel was in even more danger than I thought. The taller guard grabbed my wrists and slapped cold metal around them. Handcuffs. They started dragging me out of the storage room. I kept my face blank, my posture limp. But inside, I was calculating. I still had one chance. Daniel was out there. And I had to make sure I found him before Claire did. They dragged me through the ship's halls, my wrists bound, my mind racing. The further we walked, the more I realized something. They weren't taking me to the brig. They were taking me to her. Claire had planned this. She wanted me alone. The guards barely spoke as they hauled me down a private corridor, away from the usual guest areas. A crew-only section. Quieter. Less risk of interruptions. And then, we reached it, a small, locked room. One of them swiped a keycard, the other shoved me inside. Claire was waiting. She was standing near a table, a glass of wine in her hand, her expression composed. The door slammed shut behind me. For a moment, there was silence. Then, she smiled. "Well," she said, swirling the wine lazily. That was dramatic. I yanked at the cuffs. "Where's Daniel?" Claire let out a breathy laugh. "Oh, Adam, always so predictable." She tilted her head. "That's why this was so easy." A slow, sick realization crawled up my spine. This was never about Jeremy, was it? I said. Her smirk deepened. "Oh, don't get me wrong," she said. "Jeremy was fun, but he was never the real plan." I clenched my fists. "Then what was?" She set her glass down, stepping closer. "I wanted out, Adam," she said softly. "And I knew you wouldn't just let me go." My throat tightened. "So you set me up," I muttered. Claire ran a finger along the table's surface, feigning thoughtfulness. "I needed you to do something reckless," she admitted. "Something that would make it impossible for you to keep Daniel." She looked up, her blue eyes glinting. "You throwing Jeremy overboard?" She let out a delighted laugh. "That was just a bonus." Rage burned in my chest. "You're sick," I said. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me the self-righteous act. You knew we were falling apart." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "But what you didn't know, was that I was done letting you control everything." I let out a sharp breath. "Where is Daniel?" Claire smiled. And then, she leaned in, so close I could smell the wine on her breath. "You're never going to see him again," she whispered. I snapped. Before she could react, I lunged. My shoulder slammed into her, sending her stumbling back. Her eyes widened, hands flying out to grab something, anything, to keep from falling. Too late. She crashed into the table, knocking the wine glass over, red spilling across the surface like blood. For a brief second, she just lay there, stunned. Then, her expression changed. Slowly, too slowly, she smiled. "That," she murmured, "was a mistake." The door burst open. I barely had time to turn before something heavy struck the back of my head. Pain exploded through my skull. My vision blurred. And then, darkness. I woke to the rhythmic hum of the ship's engine beneath me. My head throbbed. My wrists ached. I was sitting. No, restrained. Handcuffs dug into my wrists, this time secured to a metal chair. My ankles were tied, too. The room was dim, the air thick with salt and something else, perfume. Claire's perfume. A shadow shifted in front of me. Well, Claire's voice drawled, that was quite a show. I blinked, trying to focus. She stood a few feet away, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. "Where's Daniel?" I rasped. She sighed, tilting her head. "You really need to stop asking that." I clenched my jaw. "You don't get to take him from me." Claire let out a mocking laugh. "Oh, Adam. You still think you're in control?" She stepped forward, lowering herself until she was inches from my face. "Let me paint you a picture," she murmured. A grieving mother. Her husband, violent, unstable, suddenly snaps. Attacks a child. Throws him overboard. Her fingers trailed lightly over my cheek. And when security finds her, she's terrified. Broken. She just wants to protect her son from the monster she married. She pulled back, her smile widening. "Tell me, Adam, who do you think they're going to believe?" My pulse pounded in my ears. She was good. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom. I was fighting for my son. I took a slow breath. "You think this is over?" I asked. Claire arched a brow. "Oh, honey. It's already over." A knock at the door. Claire stood, straightening her dress before opening it. A man stepped inside. Not security, no uniform. He was older, mid-50s, with a gut and a smug expression. Claire turned to me, grinning. "Meet Officer Grant," she purred. "He's here to make sure you stay exactly where you belong." The man gave me a once-over, then smirked. "Tough guy, huh?" I stayed silent. Claire turned back to me. "I just wanted you to see what losing feels like." I glared at her. "You haven't won." She chuckled, stepping toward the door. "Keep telling yourself that." Then she was gone. The lock clicked behind her. Officer Grant stepped closer, rolling his shoulders. "Well," he sighed. "Looks like it's just you and me now." And I knew, without a doubt. I had to get out. Now. The moment the door locked behind Claire, I knew time was running out. Officer Grant cracked his knuckles. "You know," he mused, "I don't usually take special requests, but your wife made a convincing case." I stayed silent, muscles tensed. "She says you're dangerous," he continued, pacing. "That you're a threat to her and your kid. But I gotta say," he turned to me, smirking. "You don't look like much." I forced myself to breathe evenly. "Stay calm. Let him talk." He crouched in front of me, eyes gleaming. "You know what I think?" He leaned in, close enough for me to smell his aftershave. "I think you pissed off the wrong woman." Then, he made his mistake. He laughed. And that's when I moved. I swung my head forward, fast. My forehead smashed into his nose with a sickening crack. He yelped, stumbling back, hands flying to his face. Blood. Lots of it. I yanked at my cuffs. The chair wobbled but held firm. Grant cursed, staggering. "You." I didn't let him finish. I shifted my weight hard to one side, tipping the chair. The impact jolted through my body as I slammed to the floor. Pain shot up my shoulder, but the real goal. The metal chair leg snapped. My hands were still bound, but now I had leverage. Grant lunged, but he was disoriented, blood dripping down his face. I rolled, lifting my legs, and kicked hard. The broken chair leg rammed into his knee. He screamed. The second he went down, I shifted, maneuvering the broken chair piece between my wrists. Twist. Push. The metal cut into my skin, but I didn't stop. Then. Snap. The cuffs broke. I was free. Grant groaned, clutching his knee. His gun, holstered. I lunged, yanking it free before he could react. "Don't," I warned, aiming it at his head. He froze. Panting, I wiped the sweat from my forehead. My pulse was pounding, but I couldn't stop now. I stepped over him, pressing the barrel to his forehead. "Where's my son?" He gulped, breathing hard. I don't know." Wrong answer. I grabbed his shirt, yanking him up. "Try again." He gritted his teeth, wincing in pain. She said the kid would be safe. That's all I know. Not good enough. I shoved him back to the ground. He groaned, rolling onto his side. I had to move. I had a gun. I had my freedom. But I didn't have Daniel. And I had to find him, before Claire did. I burst into the hallway, gun tucked against my side, head swiveling. No alarms. No shouting. Claire thought I was still locked up. That gave me time. But not much. I needed to think. Claire was smart, ruthless, but she had one weakness: control. She wouldn't risk losing track of Daniel. Which meant she had to keep him close. Somewhere secure. Somewhere private. My gut told me exactly where to start. The VIP suites. Claire had splurged on an upgraded room for the trip, something bigger than our cabin, but not extravagant enough to raise eyebrows. She'd have privacy. Security. A perfect place to keep Daniel trapped. I moved fast, sticking to service hallways. I was running on pure adrenaline now, rage, desperation, and one singular thought pounding in my skull. Find my son. Save my son. The ship's layout was burned into my brain. 3 decks up, past the casino, down a restricted hallway, VIP access only. I reached the suite corridor. A crew member passed by, barely glancing at me. To him, I was just another guest. But as I approached our second suite, Claire's hideaway, I spotted something that stopped me cold. 2 men. Security. Standing guard outside the door. Claire had planned for this. I clenched my jaw. No way past them without a fight. I checked the gun. 1 full clip. I could take them, but a shootout on a cruise ship. That was suicide. I needed a different angle. I needed a way inside. Then I spotted it. An adjacent balcony. The VIP suites had exterior decks, private, with metal dividers separating them. And I still remembered something Claire didn't. When we first arrived, the lock on our balcony divider was broken. I backtracked, finding the empty suite next door. The room was dark, unoccupied. Perfect. I climbed over the balcony railing, my feet hitting solid wood. Wind whipped around me. One wrong move, and I'd be overboard. I grabbed the divider. Pushed. It creaked, but moved. Claire had never reported the broken lock. Why would she? She never expected me to be climbing in from the outside. I edged through the gap, stepping onto her balcony. Heart pounding, I crept toward the glass doors. Inside, I saw Claire. She was sitting on the bed, legs crossed, sipping wine like she hadn't just framed me for attempted murder. And then I saw Daniel. He was sitting in the corner, hands tied, mouth taped shut. His eyes widened when he saw me. Rage boiled in my veins. Claire had no idea I was there. Not yet. I tightened my grip on the gun. And then, slowly, silently, I slid the balcony door open. The glass door slid open without a sound. Claire was still lounging on the bed, swirling her wine, completely unaware. But Daniel saw me. His eyes went wide, darting between me and his mother. I pressed a finger to my lips. Stay quiet. I stepped inside, gun raised, moving slow, controlled. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. Claire finally noticed the draft. She turned slightly, and froze. Her eyes locked onto mine. For the first time that night, I saw something flicker across her face. Not amusement. Not confidence. Fear. I took another step forward, keeping my voice low, even. Let him go. Claire exhaled sharply, setting her glass down. But she didn't stand. Instead, she smiled. Oh, Adam, she murmured, shaking her head. Look at you. All worked up. What do you think happens now? You shoot me. In front of your son. I ignored the bait. I kept my focus on Daniel. I said, let him go. She sighed, shifting lazily on the bed. You don't get it, do you? Her voice was soft, condescending. This is bigger than you. I already won. I clenched my jaw. She tilted her head. Right now, security is looking for you. The captain is probably already on the radio with the Coast Guard. By the time they find us, you'll be the psycho who broke in here, held a gun to his poor wife, she sighed dramatically, while their terrified son watched. She smirked. And you'll never see Daniel again. She was so sure. So smug. So blind to what was coming next. I didn't take my eyes off her as I slowly reached into my pocket. And then, I tossed my phone onto the bed. Claire blinked. It was recording. I saw the exact moment she realized what had happened. Her face drained of color. You stupid. I stepped forward, gun still raised. Untie him. Her hands clenched into fists. Untie him. Now. Claire's chest rose and fell, her mind racing. For the first time, she wasn't in control. I saw the exact moment she decided to play along. She huffed. Rolled her eyes. Fine. Slowly, she got up, walked over to Daniel, and pulled the knots loose. He ripped the tape from his mouth and stumbled toward me. I caught him, shielding him with my body. It's okay, buddy, I whispered. I got you. Claire crossed her arms. So what now? I didn't answer. I already heard it. Footsteps. Fast footsteps. She heard it, too. The knock on the door was hard. Security. Open up. Claire's face fell apart. She turned to me, eyes wide, desperate. Adam, she whispered, stepping forward, we can fix this. I didn't move. The second the door burst open, she switched. Her face crumpled, tears instantly forming. Help, she shrieked, running toward the guards. He's got a gun. He broke in, She stopped. Because none of them were moving. They were staring at my phone. One of the officers stepped forward, picking it up, playing the audio. Claire's own voice filled the room. Right now, security is looking for you. By the time they find us, you'll be the psycho who broke in here, held a gun to his poor wife, while their terrified son watched. Silence. Claire's mouth opened. Closed. I saw pure panic flood her eyes. One of the officers finally spoke. Ma'am, you need to come with us. Her head snapped toward him. What? No. He attacked. The officer cut her off. We heard you. Her face cracked. I stepped forward, wrapping an arm around Daniel. He buried his face against my chest, shaking. Claire turned to me, eyes burning with hatred. "You ruined me," she whispered. I stared at her. And then, I said the last words I would ever say to my wife. "You did that yourself." They dragged her away. And I held my son as the nightmare finally ended. By the time we reached land, Claire was already in police custody. The recording made it impossible for her to spin another lie. Jeremy. He survived. They fished him out of the ocean hours later, barely conscious. He had a broken nose, a fractured rib, but he lived. And when they questioned him, he folded fast. Claire had planned it all. She wanted me out of the picture. The money, the house, full custody of Daniel, everything. And she almost got away with it. Almost. In the end, she got 5 years for conspiracy and false imprisonment. Jeremy got probation. Me. I got my son. Claire fought for custody from behind bars, but the courts didn't buy her act anymore. She lost. Now, it's just me and Daniel. Healing. Moving forward. And sometimes, when the nightmares come, when I remember that laugh of hers, that smug certainty that she had already won, I remind myself of one thing. She was wrong. I won. Because I saved my son. And no one, will ever take him from me again.